Hi, everyone. Welcome back to RayCor Intel Deep Dive. I'm Christina Rea, the founder and CEO of RayCor Consulting. It's great to be back after a holiday and January recovery break, and I'm really excited to jump into today's conversation. Over the past year, we've seen a huge wave of AI adoption across compliance and financial crime programs. A lot of firms have rushed or are rushing to experiment with automation, machine learning, and AI-driven workflows. But now we're kind of entering a new phase where efficiency alone isn't enough. Regulators, auditors, and boards are starting to ask harder questions around transparency, governance, documentation, and accountability. Anyone that's heard me talk about AI knows I love to yap about this stuff. We're in February now. We've got Valentine's Day coming up. And I am really excited today to be joined by Joseph Quanan, who I know loves talking about this stuff as much as I do. Today's deep dive is really about the shift of falling in love with shiny AI tools to building AI that compliance teams can actually trust and defend. Joseph, thank you so much for joining. Joseph is the founder and CEO of ComplyGraph. Joseph, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Christina. Great to be chatting with you. I'm Joseph Quanan, founder of ComplyGraph, which is an AI native platform for chief compliance officers and general counsels in banking and fintech.
Amazing. I love talking to you about this stuff. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new. You might see me frantically scribbling down notes. So you're the perfect person to have on a Valentine's Day segment about AI.
Oh, thank you. Well, just real quick, likewise. Every time we chat, I'm always really inspired and learn so much about what we're building. So thank you.
Amazing. We're definitely going to have you back on for more episodes in the future.
No, let's do it.
All right, so let's dive into AI. Where are you currently seeing the most excitement around AI and compliance today? And where do you see teams starting to run into real-world challenges once these tools are actually in use?
Yeah, I think the sliding scale of what can AI actually do for teams and compliance teams, especially over the past year or so, or maybe since the sort of GPT revolution, it's been trying to figure out like, okay, are jobs being replaced? What parts of jobs are being replaced? Or is it purely augmentation, et cetera? And so I think if there's any sort of reckoning, as it were, I think we're figuring out and we have more clear data points that the practical AI use cases that, like you said, are also defensible and you can build strong governance programs around them, for the moment are really about augmenting the best people on your team. You can try to make the case that there's a headcount that's being lost or replaced, but when I'm seeing AI products and services that are really sticking and people are, renewing contracts and extending them and so on and so forth. It's really about, hey, this tool is helping me be better at my job at these very specific sets of tasks. It's helping me do them much faster, or it's helping me do more of them, et cetera, and less about like, oh, like it's changed the way that we've structured our team or anything like that.
That's music to my ears because I get nailed sometimes in webinars when I'm asked about AI and, what components of AI do I think are ready to have the training wheels off and are actually ready to replace, headcount and resources. And my answer is really almost next to nothing. And that's not popular, but
Oh,
I
sure.
agree with you. What I'm seeing now is AI, being used to augment and help people's jobs. And what I think is going to happen is not necessarily that AI is going to come and batch take away jobs, but it's going to take away tasks.
Yep.
So, on compliance, specifically, it's going to take over some lower level tasks, L1 alerts and very basic stuff. But we're still going to need, the human in the loop control we talk about to validate almost everything from the outset. It's going to take years really before AI has enough data sets to, that we would feel comfortable and we've done enough testing to take a human out of the loop. Companies that are, claiming, oh, our AI product is, it'll help reduce headcount and, it'll be cheaper. I think those are the ones we're going to be seeing in the news, around consent orders and problems,
Yeah.
with
Yeah. Yeah.
drift and everything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of a rush and excitement around this sort of like agentic AI kind of side of the house. And I
Hmm.
think rightfully so, people get excited about like, when you think about agentic AI, I think that you can run with those possibilities in a very extreme direction very quickly because it's just like exciting. There's always new things happening. I also think a dynamic that we're sort of contending with is that the way that we think about teams and companies will probably not resemble what teams and companies are going to look like in 5 years, right? If
Hmm.
we're sitting here talking about like fintech, especially, right? So fintech, generally, there are two sides of there's like the finance side of it and there's the technology side of it. So on like the finance stuff, compliance and risk teams and legal teams. And then traditionally it's like that's one side. And then the other side is the kind of big three job titles of technology teams, which is software engineers, designers, and product managers, right? And up to this point, that has been the traditional kind of bifurcation. But when we think about what AI really does, which is enable like the flattening of tasks, like this is the way that economists start to think about like how um, AI is going to affect the labor force. Is it like maybe it'll reduce some jobs and create some new ones, but really what's going to happen is that specific tasks are less bound to specific job titles, right? So it's like traditionally software engineers wrote code, designers designed user interfaces and experiences, product managers, sort of like orchestrated and went and talked to users and everything like that. With AI, there's kind of no reason now why a chief compliance officer can't go and talk to users and then prototype something. And then conversely, there's no reason why a software engineer or a data scientist can't, get hands-on experience doing things like working with BSA AML or doing risk assessments, et cetera. It's just that might maybe that scares some sort of like managerial types, but that's really the new thing that I think this new generation of AI unlocks is that you don't necessarily have to stay in your lane anymore. You can upskill very quickly. You can contribute to other parts of the business in ways that you couldn't have before AI. And I think that what that's going to lead to is there's going to be this very mutually beneficial flow of knowledge and efficiency from the finance side of the house to the tech side, back and forth that we frankly didn't see before because we were all sort of siloed in our departments.
I think that's really insightful, and I agree with you. I think that we're going to see, either new roles or current roles redefined with AI, and there's going to be more of a blending of skill sets. I talk a lot about what compliance officers need to do in terms of AI and governing it and mitigating risk. And I say I don't think regulators are going to expect them to become data scientists because regulators are certainly not data scientists. Still going through crypto, Title 31 BSA exams where regulators don't really understand, like how chainalysis works. So I can't imagine they're going to be coming up to speed quickly on the ins and outs of AI. But, to your point, understanding some of the tech and, not being tied to your specific job duties anymore, I think that's going to be the way to continue, working in this field moving forward. I personally am excited about it. If AI can get to the point for me where it's taking over the most boring, mundane tasks like risk assessments and policies and procedures, and I can do other cool stuff like use it to
Exactly.
actually look at data patterns and figure out what's actually, suspicious, identify new fraud typologies. I'm all for that. We're not quite there yet, but we, that's the point. We will get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm, not to speak on your behalf, but I'm sure you've always had an interest or like wish that you had the time and capacity to do those things, but we all were
Yes.
just resource constrained. And then we were also like, we had our wheelhouses, right? It's like, okay, like Christina has an idea for like some sort of analysis, but we have to like wait for engineering resources to free up or something like that. Or conversely, like engineers and designers and product managers have, since the dawn of time, or I guess at least the dawn of fintech, wish
Hmm.
that they could move faster, right? They're like, oh, like, why do we have to like wait for compliance to approve everything, et cetera, et cetera? But it's now both sides of that equation are much more empowered to the thing that they quote unquote want to be approved. They can go figure out and proactively get ahead of concerns that compliance, legal, and risk might have for a new design. Or you might be able to bring a first pass of a data analysis to a team so that they can productionize it or scale it or anything like that. So there's just less of like oh, we don't like have time to look into that anymore, or that's not part of my job responsibilities, so I'm not going to like work on it. Obviously this needs to be propped up and sort of supported by company culture and everything like that, but in
Mhm.
terms of the ability for people to go out of their wheelhouse and sort of cross pollinate with other functions, that's something that's really, really exciting about AI. The whole reason I'm working on ComplyGraph is because I was a software engineer and a technical product manager in-house at a bank, and I was working on policies and procedures and doing risk assessments and doing third-party due diligence reviews. But I was looking at it from this other perspective that I had of, working in B2B and consumer technology for a decade. And I think that's what we need is we need to bring our sort of unique perspectives to these problems and try to approach them from different angles. And that's where I think like to get a little corny, that's where like the magic happens.
Yeah, no, speaking of magic, you're definitely a unicorn in the space. Somebody that has the engineer background and also knows compliance and is continuously trying to learn more. We need more people like you in this space.
That's very flattering. I don't know about that, but thank you. I'll take it.
I also feel like, we could have a whole future episode just around, potential new jobs in this space. I feel like we could use the whole episode talking about the possibilities, AI, tech, how it blends risk, compliance, legal, everything that you're talking about. So, well, I'll get off that track in a second, but yeah, future business idea there. Maybe we start developing these new titles and share them with companies.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen some, right? There's like a lot of conversation about like forward deployed engineers or like GRC engineers and like all
Hmm.
like go to market engineers.
Yep.
They're just slapping engineer on everything, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of that, and it'll be fun. I'm sure in 5 years there will be job titles that we can't even conceive of currently.
I know. I'm looking forward to that. I see things for legal engineers and I'm curious. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
if you're watching this, if you're listening, if you're a legal engineer, if you've got engineer tacked onto your title, definitely please drop a comment or reach out. I'd love to know more about what you're doing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So moving away from the career track of which we could talk about all day, you had mentioned ComplyGraph. Would love to talk a little bit more about that, give you an opportunity to spotlight it. What gap did you originally set out to solve when you first started building ComplyGraph?
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned this a little bit. So I was at a partner bank. I was the second product hire. So I was I guess technically a technical product manager, but I worked very closely with the engineering team as well. And it was a bank, but also sort of operated like an early stage or mid stage startup. In an environment like that, you end up wearing a lot of hats. So I came in thinking I was going to do traditional product management stuff, and like I said, I got pulled into everything from essentially pre-sales engineering all the way through sitting with developers to help them integrate our APIs. In between that was, doing due diligence on partners and sorting through the commercials and agreements and everything like that. That all happened at the same time as the advent of the sort of like ChatGPT being publicly available and this rise of large language models. And so as I was doing that work, as I was filling out due diligence spreadsheets or working on risk assessments within a product requirements document,
Mhm.
or submitting policy and procedure updates to support a product launch. I was doing that at work. And then outside of work was seeing all the interesting stuff that was happening with LLMs. And it was just pretty obvious that that's where all this was heading, right? We were all going to have some sort of version of maybe a purpose-built tool for your specific role or occupation. Maybe it's going to be one of the major commercial foundation model providers or something like that. But regardless, it was going to be something that understood your industry nuances, understood the legal and regulatory corpora for the job that you're trying to do, and then also understood the outputs that and the deliverables that you were trying to create. And so just thinking about that idea of like, okay, I'm a product and engineering person. I'm trying to ship fintech products. I'm having to kind of to put it frankly, I'm having to put together all this paperwork and get it through approval cycles. How can AI help me with this? I just went out and started to talk to people. The kind of like natural product manager in me, even though I spent most of my time as a software engineer, the muscle or inclination to just go and ask people what their problems are and what they're currently trying to do to solve it. I kind of took that to an extreme. I was just like, how quickly can I talk to 100 people in this space and see what they're facing? Quickly, that turned into a pattern that I observed which is this, you're part of this revolution, Christina, the rise of the fractional CCO, right? Folks who 1 or 2 generations into fintech and financial services now, or kind of modern fintech, have built really great experience doing compliance, legal, and risk work. They strike out on their own. They have immediately have a book of business because you have such strong networks, but they could use an edge with putting together deliverables and actually fulfilling client work. So I started meeting a lot of folks like that who were being hired by banks and fintechs to perform this work, and they were experimenting with ChatGPT and kind of like consumer grade tools. But to be able to sort of justify that use or make it defensible, as you put it, you have to, prevent hallucinations. You just, like, the second one of these tools makes something up, you lose it, erodes all of the trust in it. Being able to have a robust audit trail and being able to say, like, hey, okay, like, yes, we developed this policy and procedure using an LLM, but what were the exact inputs into it? What was the thought process behind it? How did we break out that task? Otherwise, what, you're going to hand over a screenshot of a conversation with ChatGPT to a regulator, like, it just kind of doesn't fly. There's a lot of structure that you have to put in place to sort of defend the use of AI in this space. So that was the gap that I saw, is that people were already trying to do this naturally, but the off-the-shelf consumer tools didn't really meet them where they were in terms of the governance and risk management requirements that are expected of us in this world. And that's what led to me starting ComplyGraph.
Yeah, really interesting. Because I see a lot of that, in practice as well. I've seen every iteration of RegTech tool promising everything from reduction in false positives to, increasing efficiency to reducing, headcount. And, some of the products that are out there, are great, but they rely on a lot of, static models,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to AI. It's breaking the mold. All the frameworks that we have out there at the moment are applicable to old static models, found in traditional TradFi and banks. We don't have anything out there for something like agentic AI yet, and people don't know. This is long, but a motto of mine: people know what they don't know, me
Hmm.
included. So if you know you need compliance, but you don't know exactly what you need, you don't think you have the money for some of, the reg tech solutions on the market. Here's this cool new tool, ChatGPT coming along. I've had many startups where I've said to them, you have an AML policy at the moment. Who drafted it? 5 or 6 out of 10 are telling me ChatGPT. And I get it. I mean, if you don't know what you need, but you know you need something to share with examiners or regulators, it's the lowest hanging fruit at the moment, but you don't know that it's going to be missing all of the meat and potatoes, and it's effectively just giving you a skeleton, and you don't know what's going to be missing out of it. You don't know that it's going to be missing sections on law enforcement requests and subpoenas, 14A and B. I've tried to break ChatGPT, on my own so many different ways. Like, okay, let's see how close you can get to goal with a BSA policy, a basic BSA policy. And it's like, here's training, here's CIP, here's, independent audit, things like having board approval, or, the things I just mentioned. We're
Yeah.
really getting into the weeds on customer risk ratings and EDD. It's not going to give you that. And I've, yet to see the solutions, promising this stuff that really have it built out, to that degree. So, the fact that you're working on stuff like this is great. I really do think, it's kind of first in show to get to that deep regulatory layer, which at RayCor is something that is, what I'm always espousing when I'm, being brought on either as a fractional CCO
Mhm.
or to, advise clients. I'm giving advice always through the lens of what will your end boss want to see? Your end boss being a state regulator, the IRS. I'm in New York, so DFS, which is
Yeah.
notoriously difficult. And what do you need to showcase, and how often do you need to update it in order to pass muster with them? Because if you're showing them something that you developed with ChatGPT, I don't want to be in that room with you.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there that you just said. One of the first things that comes to mind is that I think we're seeing the latest evolution of a natural behavior anyway, which is, okay, what's the fastest and most convenient way to a first pass at a deliverable, right?
Hmm.
Like for a given policy or procedure or risk assessment or something like that. Like now with ChatGPT, et cetera, you kind of prompt it and then it spits something out and there's your first draft. But before that, what people would do is they would go on Google and search BSA AML policy. And then they
Hmm.
would find a PDF from like some other random company. And then they would like be like, well, I don't really know what I'm looking at, but I need a policy for this. So maybe I can use this, you know? And so it's all like in service of that same task of like, okay, let's try to shorten the path to having something to show, even if it's not perfect, and then we'll refine it from there. But the second thing that as you were talking just now that I thought of is the hard work still remains to get it to pass muster. Like the like messy last mile of putting together these compliance deliverables and building a defensible compliance program and a governance program for anything isn't really that much easier, at least so far with LLMs. It's that first draft to work from. You can get to something pretty convincing.
Hmm.
But even if you're sort of a professional at of the highest order, such as yourself, you have to really sit there and have the patience to hold the hand of an LLM to get to a place that you would have gotten to eventually anyway.
Hmm.
And you have to ask the very real question of like, should I have just done this the old way? You know, with all of the back and forth and the struggling that it took to be like, hey, no, like you're misinterpreting this part, or like dumping it into Word and heavily modifying it anyway. I wonder if like in a head-to-head matchup, how much time we're really saving versus there's an impressively convincing first draft, but you have to work on it a bunch anyway. And I think that we're starting to see that in reg tech and a lot of legal tech stuff anyway.
Uh, yeah, I have this conversation. My husband works in a bank, and he's in tech. He's not a data scientist, but we were talking about, the AI. Is there going to be an AI bubble? Is it going to burst anytime soon? And, I said to him that the classics will remain the classics always for a reason. There's always
Mm.
going to be a use case, for the manual old way of doing things that'll get you to goal. And yeah, that's why consultants like me exist, so that if you're using ChatGPT and getting frustrated, you can cut through the noise, hire a consultant, and we're just going to tell you the answer and say this is what the regulators are looking for.
Yeah, yeah.
So curious, with ComplyGraph, how does the platform help teams use AI while still maintaining control and audit readiness, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of that messy middle, right, that goes into, okay, I know I need some sort of compliance deliverable, whether it's a policy or procedure, a risk assessment, a completed due diligence spreadsheet, anything like that. Certainly, you can take a crack at it with off-the-shelf AI or LLMs. But what ComplyGraph offers is the sort of the built-in decomposed tasks along the way, so that when you have that structured deliverable, you can actually see what went into it. You can see what regulatory and legal sources were used as citations. You can see the specific tasks of like, okay, it worked on the introduction first, and then this section, and then the conclusion, and really be able to almost like trace back or rewind on the decision making process that led up to the final deliverable in a way where you can pipe that out to a log and give it to a regulator, or even just like keep it internally so that you can say like, okay, we had this policy, but like who made it? Like how did it get done, etc. In a way that is sort of like structured in a format that I think resonates more with compliance and risk people.
I love that. I wish more people building AI had that mindset. That's why I created, a solution that I have called AIR, AI Risk and Explainability. It is specifically geared towards compliance officers thinking through what are the regulators going to ask you about your AI and the tech you're using. So the closer you can help them get to goal, especially while they're trying to figure out what they even need to evidence and showcase, the better it is for everybody, at the end of the day, especially ultimately the regulators who aren't going to, probably understand a lot of this from the outset. It's not uncommon for compliance officers to have to teach regulators how to kind of do their job during exams. So
Yeah.
I love hearing people building the tech kind of being thoughtful about, not just how is it going to be useful and the efficacy for the end user, but then how will they be able to defend it to their examiners.
Yeah. I think the very interesting thing about where we're at with these models is when you look at the history of machine learning, or I mean, it doesn't even have to be anything super complicated, but with modeling in financial services in general, you used to be able to go in and take apart models, right? You used to
Mhm.
be able to go in and be like, okay, if we adjust these parameters, or if we train it on different data, or if we perform a sensitivity analysis, how is it going to affect the output? And the way that these models are built, it's basically impossible that we're ever going to be able to do that. The closest that I've seen so far, if anyone has in academia or industry or otherwise has seen a better approach, is decompose the thing that you're trying to do to as small of a repeatable task as possible and test that over and over. Build metrics around what does it mean for this task to be successful. Build benchmarks around, okay, if we like throw all these wonky inputs at it, is it still going to give the outputs that we have? That at least gives you the defensibility of like, hey, this one part of our data pipeline in our AI product is responsible for this one task. Here are the ways that we've tested it. Because you're not going to be able to give a regulator a training data set to show provenance. It's just no one has that unless you've trained your own model. In that case, if you have the resources to like train a model that compares to the commercial models, you might not have this problem. But that's really what it takes, is like kind of looking at it almost like from a product perspective, a product plus risk perspective, and breaking it down to as small of pieces as possible, and then really doing your evaluations and benchmarking at that level. And what that the output of that is strong governance and risk management.
Music to my ears. Love a conversation with a tech person that understands, how in the weeds to get on this stuff. I know we're getting close to the top of our hour for this conversation, but I wanna ask you a quick question and get your opinion. I love asking people this question because I'm constantly asked this question. Where do you think automation should stop and human oversight should always remain? Or if there is automation, at what point do you think it will be acceptable to take that human in the loop control out of
Mm.
the mix and send it off into the wild?
Yeah. So we're in fintech, right? So the first answer that comes to mind is we have plenty of examples now of things going wrong.
Mhm.
I won't name the names. I think everyone, like when you hear about like what's gone wrong in fintech in previous generations, it's especially with stuff like bank fintech partnerships, we all kind of like know what we're talking about. I think if you can reasonably pinpoint a decision where, hey, depending on how this decision branches out, if we get this wrong, people will lose their money, or businesses will lose their money, or it'll jeopardize like our integrity as a financial institution. Like, please don't use AI for that. Like, please make that final call wherever that is, upstream or downstream in your process, that like has the real risk of people losing their money. Like, even if we have FDIC insurance and all this kind of stuff, like the like responsible AI in fintech should always be about empowering people to make financial decisions and grow in their financial security. And I think anything that could possibly jeopardize that, use your efficiency for, getting your ducks in a row and everything like that. But when it comes to messing with real people's money, I think that that's where I get a little nervous, and that's where we should keep humans in the loop, hopefully forever.
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful way to put it. It's so easy to think about this in terms of efficiency and, kind of some of the same old promises we've talked about on this call in terms of reducing the overhead that compliance has always, been known to be in the industry. But if we take a step back and we think about why we're doing what we're doing, and the real people affected by this and, the compliance and the fact that we're trying to prevent money laundering and illicit crimes and
Yeah.
fraud, I think your answer is probably the best and the most human one that I've heard. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, this has been a great conversation. We're definitely going to have you back. We could keep talking about this for the rest of the day.
Would love to. Yeah.
But we'll wrap it up for now. Joseph, thank you so much for sharing a practical and honest look at where AI compliance is really headed. For everyone listening and watching, we'll include links to ComplyGraph. Joseph, where can people find you? Where's the best and easiest place? It's usually LinkedIn. Any place else?
No, LinkedIn sounds great. I'm Joseph Quanan on there, complygraph.com. Yeah, if you like talking about this stuff at all, Christina can attest to this, that I'm always perhaps a little too eager to nerd out over this kind of stuff. So yeah, please reach out.
But it's always in a fun and approachable way, which I really appreciate. Nothing gets too techy. So yes, thank you for joining. Thank you everyone for listening. You can find more insights in this month's RayCor Intel Dispatch. We're going to be talking about AI. You can learn more about AIR. You can find me, Christina Rea, on LinkedIn, as well as check out raycorconsulting.com. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next conversation.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, everyone.